There's a reason movie budgets are in the millions. Sometimes just one intense day of filming can set production back an extra 7 figures. Some films get off to a very expensive start, like when Back to the Future replaced its lead actor after filming had already started and cost the studio millions right out of the gate.
Yeah.
But even this casting failure pales in comparison to some of the most expensive scenes that ended up on the cutting room floor, like an alternate ending to World War Z and an entire third of the movie Cleopatra. Here are 10 of the most expensive deleted scenes ever.
But look, baby, I can't talk to you now, but my president needs me.
World War Z had a pretty huge third act planned, which perfectly set up a sequel for Brad Pitt's zombie flick. But alas, it wasn't meant to be, and now pieces of the elaborate ending are hard to find, and news of the sequel is even harder. The original ending had Jerry and his sidekick Sagan make it to Russia and join the anti-zombie army. Then the story skips ahead to winter as Jerry leads the Russian army into a huge zombie battle. To get even more complicated and cause even more location shooting, Jerry then contacts his wife Karen, finds out that she's in trouble, and sets off on a quest across Siberia to find her in America. The third act was almost completely filmed by the time the studio decided to rewrite the ending. Paramount decided it wanted a more hopeful and wholesome finale, but between the location shoots, the extra writing, and the amount of Brad Pitt's time they had to pay for, the decision ultimately set the studio back an extra $25 million. Not every movie star's hard work makes it to the big screen. This was the case with Anna Paquin's Rogue in X-Men Days of Future Past. The True Blood actress spent a week on set in Montreal, Canada, filming some elaborate scenes for the film. But when it came time for editing, every single one of her scenes ended up on the cutting room floor. The culprit wasn't bad acting or writing, rather, director Bryan Singer just thought that the footage was too rich and didn't fit into the rest of the movie. They ultimately decided to cut it for time, but the change sent the film into 2 weeks of reshoots. After reshooting and paying Anna Paquin for not appearing in the film, an extra $2.8 million was added to the film's budget, but the money wasn't a complete waste. First of all, Anna Paquin said she had the absolute best time filming her scenes and that being cut from the film didn't really bother her that much. And second, the entire Rogue cut of the film, which features the Rogue storyline and all of her deleted scenes, was released on DVD. The result is 17 extra minutes of footage and a version of the film that a lot of fans enjoy even more than the Rogue-free version. For Superman Returns, director Bryan Singer thought up an epic 5-minute opening scene where Superman returns to Krypton. The elaborate 5-minute scene was completely filmed and drew sci-fi comparisons to Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. But while most agreed that the sequence was beautifully shot, the studio just didn't think it was right for a superhero film. Their justification for cutting the scene was that it was just too slow and contemplative for an action-packed movie. But the sci-fi scene refused to go quietly. After costing the studio about $10 million to film, it later found its way onto the internet and into the hearts of fans everywhere. It's even been released as bonus content on the Superman Anthology Blu-ray, and Bryan Singer still gets credit for trying to be one of the first directors to introduce a more emotional, introspective superhero to the world. You might already know that Michael J. Fox wasn't the first actor to play Marty McFly in Back to the Future, but what you might not know is that the first Marty, played by actor Eric Stoltz, filmed enough of the movie before being recast to cost the studio millions of dollars. Director Robert Zemeckis wants everyone to know that there's nothing wrong with Eric Stoltz. He's just not Marty. Stoltz was first hired after Michael J. Fox turned down the role due to scheduling conflicts with family ties. But 5 weeks into filming, Zemeckis and Steven Spielberg knew they needed Fox for their role. Zemeckis and Spielberg quickly negotiated the casting change with Universal, and the rest is history. The filming worked around Fox's schedule, and we got the Back to the Future we know and love today. But it did end up costing the studio $3 million extra to recast and reshoot all of Stoltz's scenes. It was worth every penny. The Wizard of Oz is a monumental part of movie history, and even this classic movie cost the studio tons of money on reshoots. In fact, the movie had an entire deleted scene that was destroyed after filming, but luckily, composer Harold Arlen just so happened to capture a dress rehearsal of the lost scene on home video. The lost jitterbug sequence features Dorothy, the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion being bitten by evil bugs that make them break into song and dance. Modeled after the popular dance of the same name, the whole jitterbug sequence came from an older copy of the script that was later dropped and rewritten. The whole number took about 5 weeks to shoot, so choosing to cut the scene cost the studio every cent they'd put into it, which was about $80,000 back then, meaning it would have cost more than $1 million today. The soundtrack of the song, rehearsal footage, and an animated remake are all that remain, so we'll have to use our imaginations a little to picture what the creepy dancing bug scene would have looked like in the movie.
Come along, Dorothy. You don't want any of those apples.
Director Paul Feig wanted the 2016 Ghostbusters remake to be action-packed and laugh-out-loud funny. That's why he hired Chris Hemsworth to play a ditzy secretary.
Oh, because of the glasses and the handsomeness.
And that's also why he spent 2 days and 7 figures shooting an entire dance number starring Hemsworth and featuring a bunch of extras.
Do you have any idea how many federal regulations you're breaking on a daily basis?
The high-energy dance sequence features Hemsworth getting down to the Bee Gees' You Should Be Dancing, while extras in Times Square watch him bust a move. But Feig decided that the scene was actually too good and distracted the audience from where the movie was supposed to go next. He ultimately cut the entire scene, but it made its way onto the screen anyway in the form of an end credits sequence with the intention of putting the audience in a good mood after having seen the film. But staging, shooting, and Chris Hemsworth's salary meant that the scene ended up costing the studio over $1 million for a little bit of fun. The original ending to 1986 musical film Little Shop of Horrors was much darker than the version that was released in theaters. An astonishing 23-minute ending was cut from the film after test audiences saw it and left the cinema feeling depressed. But what exactly made the ending so dark? Well, it was probably the fact that the scene ended with the two main characters losing their lives and the alien taking over the planet. Yeah, not too much to be hopeful about there. But the audience not liking the ending meant that the entire completed film had to be put on the back burner as the cast returned to shoot a brand new ending. The new ending found both leads alive and well and was much more pleasing to fans. But the changes cost the studio about $5 million. If you're in the mood to see the entire darker ending, it's thankfully still out there. A black and white version of the original ending was included on the 1998 DVD release of the film, so at least that $5 million wasn't a total waste. Sometimes the social and political climate just isn't ready for certain kinds of film. This can be particularly hard when the film you're trying to release is a pretty violent one.
Bang.
This was the case with Gangster Squad, which had its release date pushed back by 4 whole months after the studio decided to cut one very important scene. The movie originally featured a crucial scene that took place in Grauman's Chinese theater. In the scene, gangsters fire upon the audience before taking the fight to the streets. But due to opinions on firearms and recent disasters involving weapons, director Ruben Fleischer and the studio agreed that they would need to do something different. Glimpses of the original scene still exist in the movie's early trailer, but the deleted scene won't be featured on any official release. Rewriting and shooting the scene ended up costing the studio more than $2 million, but they still don't regret their choice to remove the excessive violence. Dr. Strangelove has one of the most interesting and elaborate deleted scenes ever, and it wasn't even sanctioned by the film studio. This deleted scene involves thousands, yes, thousands of custard pies. Stanley Kubrick's 1964 anti-war comedy was supposed to end with an all-out pie fight in the war room between diplomats. The studio agreed that the scene should be filmed, but they didn't think it would take any longer than a day.
I find this very difficult to understand.
Kubrick didn't really take this advice to heart and instead filmed the scene over a 2-week period. Each day, at least 2,000 pies were brought to the stage and then thrown, smashed, and even made into sandcastles. But after tragedy struck JFK, the footage was deemed inappropriate, particularly because of the line, "Our president has been struck down by a pie in the prime of his life." But the cost of pies and reshooting the scene set production back over $2 million when adjusted for inflation.
How does that coincide with your post-war commie conspiracy?
But hey, at least it looks like they had fun. 1963's Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, was a smash hit. It was the biggest box office success of that year, and considering that the production of the film seemed cursed, this is even more impressive. The film cost over $44 million, which is about $320 million now, and was the most expensive film ever made at the time of its release. After Cleopatra debuted, it became the biggest box office success in 1963, but it never really made a huge profit for 20th Century Fox. In fact, it almost caused the company to go bankrupt. But what exactly was so complicated about making Cleopatra? For one, all of the elaborate movie sets were built in London, and then built all over again in Rome after shooting was forced to relocate. Then, Elizabeth Taylor nearly lost her life while on set and had to be sent for an emergency tracheotomy. And it's no surprise that the cast and crew were exhausted after creating the 6-hour masterpiece, only to have it cut down to 3 hours at the request of the studio. People have tried to put together a longer cut of the movie, but most of the deleted footage has been destroyed, leaving only rehearsal footage of the scenes. It's estimated that the almost 3 hours of deleted scenes cost the studio the equivalent of $100 million today.
You asked for 1/3 of the Roman Empire.
Any scenes you wish made the cut, and which are you surprised are so expensive? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more from ScreenRant. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.